Hey Code School friends, welcome to the third edition of the JavaScript Road Trip. As you know by now, JavaScript is a very powerful web scripting language used all over the world in innumerable web-based applications, and a knowledge of it is going to be an extraordinary asset to you on your journey as a developer. Now, if JavaScript is still sort of new to you, you probably want to go hang with Road Trips 1 and 2 because we'll definitely be taking several, if not all, of those concepts and layering them into the topics of this course. As far as new stuff, we'll be examining the fine art of the function expression, as well as the cool and often mind-boggling use of closures, and then the impact of hoisting on load order. Ultimately, we'll wrap up with an introductory exploration of the awesomely important JavaScript object, and then examine their blueprints in the form of constructors and prototypes. So with that, let's start the JavaScript Road Trip, Part 3.
From the labyrinth of loops to the variable valley, we'll see the cliffs of value first. JavaScript's right up your alley. Built-ins, bluff, file spas, array, archipelago. Declarations in a desert where you'll find out how far you'll go. Learn to program, take a ride, buy a ticket, step inside. All aboard, you're at the station to increase your education. Bon voyage, skinny dip! As long as functions you don't skip on this, the JavaScript Road Trip.
To start off this leg of the road trip, we'll be examining a special usage of a function inside of JavaScript called the function expression. Periodically when we code, we need to make an efficient choice about which function to actually build when our program loads. Typically we do this when we've received a special piece of data or when we need to build a one-time, one-run function for our websites. Also, we want to make sure that we do this without building every possible function that we could when our program loads in order to conserve program memory. Additionally, we often want to take functions and pass them to other functions. Or we may want to immediately call the function as soon as it's built. And with that, we hope you enjoy traversing the forest of function expressions. So here we are in level 1. Welcome back to JavaScript Road Trip 3. So in this level, the first level, we'll be looking at function expressions, a pretty cool thing, which we like to call functions on the fly. Now, in order to understand what a function expression is, we'll first need to look at what you already understand, which is a declared function. Check this one out right here. You can see here on this first block, a declared function called diff of squares. Now we've given it two inputs, a and b, and you can see that we've squared a and squared b and then subtracted them. See the minus sign in the middle, and then that's the value that we are returning. So there's our declared function. This function, since it's declared, is actually loaded right when the program is run, and it is loaded into memory and held there until you want to use it. Function expressions apply things a little bit differently. So the first thing that we would do is we would establish a variable. Let's call it diff. And then what we would do is we would rearrange the declared function into an assignment statement. And this particular thing is called a function expression, and it loads only when this particular line of code is reached inside your program. So take a look, you can see the function keyword, then you can see the diff of squares function name and the inputs all in the same place, and then the very same function body that does the same stuff that we had in our declared function. Again, this loads only when your program reaches that line of code. Another thing you should take note of is that since this is now an assignment statement, meaning we're taking this entire function and assigning it to the variable diff, we need a semicolon here on the end of our final bracket of our function body. Now, in order to call our cool new variable diff, we're actually going to use the variable's name. That's right, it's going to be diff. We're not going to use the diff of squares name that's inside the function. Then we just pass two parameters to it. We're just going to give it 9 and 5, and you can see that that returns 56 because you get 81 minus 25 returns 56. Something to check out here is that I have given parameter parentheses to the variable diff. We haven't seen that before, right? And then we pass parameters into those parentheses that we've given to diff. And we need those in order to actually call the function and give it some parameters. Now you might be wondering, Why in the heck do we still have that diff of squares name if we're just going to use the diff variable name? It's an excellent question, and guess what? We don't. So let's take a look at that. There's this cool thing in JavaScript and in other languages called the anonymous function. It means that you can build a function expression without a name because it's being assigned to a variable that will hold the entire contents of that function. So since we don't need that diff of squares name, we can go ahead and get rid of it. Let's get rid of it. There it goes. And now we will just scoot the parameters and the first body bracket up against the function keyword, and we have an anonymous function, particularly an anonymous function expression. Now guess what? Just because it's anonymous doesn't mean anything. We still call the function with our new variable name, and we pass in some parameters, 4 and 2. That would give us 16 and 4, and when we subtract those, we get 12. Now in our previous JavaScript courses, we've been logging out tons of variables to see what they hold, to see what their contents are. What might happen if we did that with our new diff variable that holds a function? Well, as you might expect, you will get the actual function body returned as a result, so that you can always check the contents of a variable to see what function it is actually referring to. Let's take a look and see how we can use function expressions, stored functions, in a national park terminal, specifically at the forest of function expressions. One of the cool things about variables that hold functions is that they can be passed into other functions for use inside that function. Let's take a look at that. So say we had a JavaScript file, we'll call it terminal.js for the National Park Terminal, and we wanted to build a greeting for people that were attending, let's say, the Badlands National Park. So here you can see we have established a variable called greeting. And in that particular variable, we are going to store a function expression that will alert a message to the user. Thanks for visiting the Badlands. We hope your stay is better than most. Next, near the end of our file, we will establish a declared function called closeTerminal. And what that will get passed is a function expression. The parameter name for it will be message. And then inside closeTerminal, that function will be called. So maybe you can kind of see how we will use the greeting variable coming up. Later on in our file, after our customer has perhaps interacted in some other ways with the terminal, the closeTerminal function will be called, and you can see that we've passed greeting into closeTerminal. So let's take a look at what happens when we pass greeting to closeTerminal. Well, the message parameter becomes the greeting variable. And then inside closeTerminal, the function that's in greeting gets called. Then we would get the alert message, thanks for visiting the Badlands, we hope your stay is better than most. So one greeting is pretty cool, but what if we had multiple greetings, right? We could have multiple different kinds of greetings for different kinds of customers. Function expressions are very cool and very useful in this way because they give us a flexibility in determining exactly which functionality we want to store and then pass in later. So let's go ahead and scoot our stuff down, right? And now we are going to try to build multiple greetings. So we'll establish our greeting variable, but we're not going to assign a function expression to it quite yet because we need to decide whether we have a new customer or an old customer. So we've got some code that'll be there in our terminal.js file that will decide whether we have a new customer or an old customer, and therefore new customer will be true or false by the time we reach this conditional. If we have a new customer, then we'll go ahead and assign our previous message that we built to the greeting variable. But otherwise, meaning it's not a new customer, then we'll make a different function. And we'll say, welcome back to the Badlands. Guess they aren't so bad, huh? So that's for our old customers, people that have been to the Badlands before. So now you can notice that we have two possible greetings with one variable. Let's see what we can do with that. So now, if new customer somehow was set to false by our terminal, we know that when we would pass the greeting variable into closeTerminal, we would get the old customer message. Welcome back to the Badlands. Guess they aren't so bad. And then if we were to also change new customer to true, we can see the message that comes up is exactly the old one that we had built before. So that's a brief introduction to function expressions, and we will release you to the challenges. I hope your stay is better than most.